Happy Wednesday morning, everybody. So glad that you're on here. If you're new to the program, my name is Curtis Cooper. I'm with the Stony Creek Church of Christ right here in Noblesville. We have been just looking at different letters, different sections. We went through First John, took a look at Second John 2 days ago, and now we're going to look at Third John. And there's a lot for us to take in, so let's go ahead and read. We're going to begin in Third John verse 1, and then we're going to talk about some of the things that we've read. 3 John verse 1 says, "The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers. For I rejoice greatly when brethren came and testified of the truth that is in you, just as you walk in truth. I have no greater joy than to hear my children walk in truth. Beloved, you do faithfully whatever you do for the brethren and for strangers who have bore witness of your love before the church. And if you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of the Lord, you will do well, because they went forth for his name's sake, taking nothing from the Gentiles. We therefore ought to receive such, that we may become fellow workers for the truth. And I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have preeminence amongst them, does not receive us. Therefore, if I come, I will call to mind his deeds in which he does, prating against us with malicious words, and not content with that. And he himself does not receive the brethren, and forbids those who wish to, putting them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. He who does what is good is of God, but he who does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has good testimony from all, and from the truth itself. And we also bear witness, and you know that our testimony is true. I had many things to write, but I do not wish to write to you with pen and ink. But I hope to see you shortly, and we shall speak face to face. Peace to you. Our friends greet you. Greet the friends by name." All right, well, there's a lot for us there, a lot for us to really think about, kind of give some thought and meditate, kind of ruminate on. Let's just begin there in verses 1 through 3. Let's talk through what we just read there. Again, we have the formal information in these verses, and we see who did the writing, although we don't have the name, notice, but that's nothing new for John. First and Second John didn't have John's name either. And neither did his gospel. He would just call himself the beloved, or the one whom Jesus loves, kind of speaking in third person. But by history, we know who wrote all three of those. And notice he calls himself, again, the elder. Maybe he's in a position of an elder. Maybe he's later in his life and he's older. We don't really know. But notice who he's doing the writing to the beloved Gaius. And so who's that? Well, there's several Gaiuses in the New Testament. There's Gaius of Macedonia. He was a fellow traveler with Paul. He got caught up in the silversmith riots in Ephesians. Over in Acts 19, we have Gaius of Derbe, another companion of Paul, kind of on his final journey to Jerusalem in Acts 20. Gaius of Corinth, who Paul baptized, 1 Corinthians 1:14. And this is believed to be Gaius of Ephesus, but we don't really know who this is. I'm not sure it really makes a lot of difference for us, to actually know, and there's not a lot for us to go by if we're trying to figure out. But notice, to the beloved Gaius, in whom I love in truth. So he loves him. The apostle of love, makes sense, but also a big theme in the gospel, in the first letter to John, and really in the second, and now this letter as well. Notice verse 1, beloved Gaius, whom I love. Verse 2, beloved. Verse 6 talks about how they bore witness of his love before the church. Also notice he says, whom I love in truth. John intentionally connects truth and love again. That's really important. The basis of our love for one another is truth. It is truth that unites us as Christians. And the more we ground ourselves in the truth, the more we're going to have love for one another. At least that's the way it ought to work. And so that serves really as a theme for this book, as well as it did the last book. Verse 1, truth and love. Verse 3, testify of truth in you, just as you walk, or of love in you, just as you walk in truth. Verse 4, testifies of truth in you, just as you walk in truth. Verse 4, my children walk in truth. Verse 8, become fellow workers from the truth or for the truth. Verse 10, testify from the truth, testimony from the truth itself. Verse 12, our testimony is true. And so there's a lot about truth in this letter. Also think about how these two books, 2nd and 3rd John, kind of complement each other really well. First book talked about how you shouldn't greet or welcome those who do not have the truth. But this book is about how you need to welcome and care for those who do teach the truth. Very complementary to each other. There in verses 2 and 4, John prays that Gaius would prosper both economically and physically. Nothing wrong with that, but he doesn't even leave out spiritually, which ought to be our main focus, because he says, just as your soul prospers in the Lord. John must have thought that Gaius was doing pretty well spiritually, because he prays that, his financial and health prosperity will accompany his spiritual prosperity. But notice how John knows that Gaius is doing well. Somebody came and told him. There was some testimony. There's some brethren who've been out preaching the truth, and they spoke of the truth in him and how he walked in truth. In other words, Gaius didn't just believe the truth, he actually practiced the truth. That's the measure of spirituality for John. To him, truth mattered. We got to believe it and practice it. And it's not optional. It's a good measure for spiritual prosperity. And John says he has no greater joy than to hear his children, possibly Gaius, walking in the truth, than to hear about those people that you brought to the Lord, prospering in the Lord, to see them growing, to see them walking in the Lord, growing in truth. Like parents, think about it. One of the greatest joys in our lives is to see our children grow. And not just see them grow, but I think maybe the greatest moment is when you see your children obey the truth, obey the gospel. This is true with those who we teach the gospel to as well. Like, you pour yourself into them, you teach them, you hope that they obey the gospel. And then when you finally see them obey the gospel, it's a very emotional moment. But it's also very emotional to see people who you've taught the gospel to kind of grow in that truth, to grow and become the kind of people that God wants them to be. Look at the next section in verses 5 through 8. John commands Gaius, or he commends him for taking care of the brethren. Those who came through teaching and preaching, those were the ones who testified of his love because he cared for them. He took care of them. Those were probably passing through on their preaching journeys. And what did Gaius do for them? Well, I know he probably gave them a place to stay, opened up his home, hospitality, fed them, gave them water. And so he even did that for strangers, people that Gaius didn't even know. How would you feel about doing that for people that you don't know? Gaius did. And we probably should push ourselves to learn how to do that as well. But John says he sent them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. He did well. He took care of them while they were there, gave them food, water. And Jesus said, remember, he who gives a cup of cold water in my name shall not lose their reward. Like those who belong to me. If you give them a cup of water because they belong to me, then you'll get a reward. Gaius also sent them forth on their way for the Lord's name's sake. I think it's more than just kind of waving at them, telling them goodbye. He probably gave them supplies for their journey, maybe a map, maybe some money, maybe some clothes or whatever. But John says that's something we ought to be doing for the brethren. That they were preaching the gospel, and that's something worth supporting. And so we should do something for them because they've done something for our good spiritually. And so who else was going to do it? The Gentiles, those who are of the world, they're not interested, in helping them out. They're fully dependent upon God's people. That's what Jesus taught when he sent out the 70, when he sent out the 12, 2 by 2. He told them to take very little resources so that they would be dependent upon those who believed. And I think that's also good for those who believe. That's good for us. It helps us learn not to be so selfish, to make sacrifices. Also we're in fellowship with them. We're in a sense of participating in the message that they're presenting. Look at verses 9 through 12. John had written something to the church. Man, wonder what it says. Have no idea. But Diotrephes did not receive it. Look at the description of this man, Diotrephes. He loved the preeminence. He was on a power trip. He wanted authority and position. He just wanted control of the church, although he may say, well, this is for the good of the church. But when John says he's coming, John says he's going to get there and he's going to call him out on it. He's going to remind the church of all the things that he's done, how he's made accusations, how he didn't receive brethren like John, who came to help the church. He forbid them. He also threw them out of the church, like he's the one that owned it. He's really just a bully. That's what he is. And so John's message to them is, do not imitate people like Diotrephes, who do evil things, but to look to those who do good, the things that God tells them to do, and imitate those people. They're from God, but Diotrephes is not from God. Look at the good example. He gives a man by the name of Demetrius. And what does he do? He has a good testimony of the brethren, and from the truth, and from John and his companions. But notice he has a good testimony from the truth itself. He's just saying the truth's going to bear this out, but that's what he does. He concerns himself with the truth. He believes it and he follows it. And look at this last section here, verses 13 and 14. John had a lot of things to share with them, but he didn't want to write it down on pen and paper. He preferred to do it face to face. There's a lot of benefits to being face to face. There's some things that are just better in person. And so he hopes to see Gaius shortly, where he has plans to call Demetrius out, apparently, and to encourage the church. But John closes out this letter by just wishing them peace and saying that he and his friends greet Gaius, and he wanted Gaius to greet his friends by name on behalf of John. A good letter. Man, these John letters are really good. We don't spend enough time in them. There's really a lot of application for us. I hope you found benefit to this. I'd encourage you not to just put this down after we get done with this live, but you pick it up for yourself, read it some more, think about some of the things that we've seen and things that we've heard from John here. So glad that you were on here this morning. If you have any thoughts or any comments, please let me know. Please go ahead and comment down in the comment section. I'll be able to interact with you. That's one of the great benefits of this program. But also, I encourage you to really, really dig deeper. Study 3 John again. Read it again today. Man, so grateful that you're here. Want to encourage you. Tomorrow we'll be back and we'll pick up. I think we're in Psalm 28. We'll pick up in Psalm 28 and either do a portion of that or the whole psalm. I can't remember. That psalm, but hope that you'll join here tomorrow, where we'll be a little bit more lengthy in our study and really seek to try to meditate, give her some things to think about. But hope everybody has a great rest of their Thursday or their Wednesday. God bless everybody.